If you guys want one-on-one training, online training, or nutritional coaching, please head on over to my website, jpfitnesspro.com. Just go to the services tab and select which one you would like. You can also subscribe to my newsletter and contact me through my website as well. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks.
What is up, everybody? This is JP here. Hopefully everyone watching had a good New Year's and a good Christmas. If you didn't listen to my last podcast, I am a little sick right now, or I'm coming off of sickness. So if my voice seems a little raspy or off, it is because I'm kind of coming off of sickness. But I hope you guys all did have a good holidays overall. Today's video is going to be a how-to series, and specifically how to do an overhead press. I've had a lot of you guys ask me over the last month or two to explain certain exercises or go over how I would teach technique. So I'm going to go over basically how I do an overhead press today. This is going to be a series, and I'm going to go over key exercises. I'm not sure if I'm going to go over more simple exercises like curls or tricep extensions. If I do, I might group them all into one video or group very similar ones into the same video. But I'm definitely going to hit all the compounds before I start going to the simpler exercises. And one other note too is that one good quote that I've heard in regards to exercise is that once you apply the science to a workout program and to a specific exercise, past that point, it's more like an art. Building a program or technique is more like an art. Obviously, there's those universal black and white things that everyone should do in regards to technique or making a program. But once you get past those black and white things that are pretty much sure in the scientific literature, it's more of like an art. You make your program how you want to, or you do a technique like how you want to. So again, a lot of these things are going to be things that I think are universal, but then there's going to be things in here that are more my personal take on how to do an overhead press. So an overhead press, again, it's just I'm going over a strict overhead press, not a push press. So the first thing that I would do is you want the bar set up at a height that you have to do maybe a very tiny, I guess I would say a tiny squat to unrack the bar. I don't have the bar at a height that you have to do a deep squat to unrack it, nor do you want the bar so high that you have to do a mini press to kind of unrack it. You want to be able to have to get just underneath and then do a tiny stand up, and then you can clear it just as easy as like that. So again, you don't want it too low and you don't want it too high. So I guess a good reference would be somewhere around your upper chest, maybe your collarbone. Again, you want to have to do a quarter squat to get under the bar, and just like that, okay? So nothing more. You don't want to have to go too low or too high to unrack the bar. The second thing is that for hand width, I think that if you were to put your hands right in front of your shoulders, just like this, you go slightly out from there. So if I were to walk up to the bar and put my hands right in front of my shoulders, go slightly out from there. You don't want to go too wide or you don't want to go too narrow, because again, in my personal opinion, it's just not going to make it easy for you to apply force to the bar. I feel like if you go too wide, it can almost turn it to like, it puts your shoulders in an awkward position. I know a lot of people said this. I know Athlete and X went over this. And I've heard a lot of people actually say this point, but I just think that going too wide can actually hurt your shoulders, and it could just make it put you in an awkward position to be able to apply force to the bar. Same thing with going too narrow too. If you go too narrow, it's just gonna put you in an awkward position so you can't apply force to the bar. Like one thing, for example, if you go too narrow, this kind of forces your wrists to kind of bend in an awkward way, and that could actually hurt your wrist. But there's a lot of little things that go into going too wide or too narrow, which I'm not going to get into this video. The point is, a good starting point, which you can adjust on your own, is just put your hands right in front of your shoulders and then go a little bit out from there. So again, hands right in front of your shoulders and then go a little bit out from there. This is pretty much good for me right here. So again, you have the bar height set up, you have your hand placement set up, and that's essentially your starting point. Now from here, all you want to do is, again, from here, get underneath the bar, and then quarter squat it, and then take as few steps as you can to unrack the bar. Now, sometimes I'll see people you want to take as many steps as necessary, but as few as you can in that same process. Like if you optimize it and play around with it, and it takes you 6 steps to get a good foot position and to make sure that you're in an optimal position for you to drive the bar and apply as much force as you can and lift as much weight as you need to, then take that 6 steps. But if you can do it in 6 steps and you, I don't want to say get lazy, but you start to do it in 8, 10, or 12 steps, you start taking a bunch of steps, messing with your feet, that's probably going to hurt you in the long run. Again, it's not, you're wasting too much energy holding the bar and just setting up. And yeah, I guess I could say you're just wasting too much energy. So you don't want to spend too much time unracking it and getting in a good position. So again, I recommend as few steps as needed, but as many as absolutely necessary. So don't listen to anyone say, oh, you should do it in 4 steps. It may take you 6, it may take you 4, it may take you just 1, from here. Some people can just, 1, 2, and then they're good from there. It usually takes me 2 steps to clear the bar from the rack, and then it takes me about 1 or 2 more steps to adjust my feet and adjust my foot width. And so it's about a total of 4 steps. Again, so kind of to recap real quick is bar height, hand width is right in front of your shoulders and slightly out. And then you want to take as few steps as necessary to clear the bar from the rack and put yourself in a good position. The last thing before I actually get into or a couple more things before we get into the actual press is you want your feet, I essentially just say you want your feet between hip and shoulder width. So if you look down at your feet, you want your feet right underneath your hips, and then between there and shoulder width, which again, if you were outside your shoulders and you drew a line straight down, you want it anywhere in that range. Whatever feels comfortable for you, that's going to be specifically a personal thing. Now, if you go straight down from your hips, anything inside that, and then if you draw a line from your shoulders straight down, anything outside that, those are extremes, and I really wouldn't recommend that specifically for a strict overhead press, just because it's just not, it's going to put yourself in an awkward position to drive force, or to stay stable, I guess I should say. Again, if you want this bar and you want all the weight to be driving straight down, you want it to be like a simple pattern through your kinetic chain. If you're making things super complicated and putting yourself in a position that's not optimal for balance and stability, then again, I've talked about it in many of my videos that you want high stability. The higher stability that you can get, the more force you're going to be able to drive into whatever resistance that you're using, and you're going to be able to lift more weight. So for a foot stance, again, just between hip and shoulder width, and that should be good from there. Again, bar height, check. Hand placement, check. Few steps back, check. And then foot placement, check. So once you have all that, you come here, you unrack it. From this position, the main thing that you want to focus on when you're standing with the bar is that you want to get as tight as possible. You want to brace as much as you can. I've done a video on this specifically about bracing, but you want to get as tight as possible. You want to squeeze your core, you want to squeeze your glutes, you want to squeeze your quads, you want everything absolutely rock solid. Now, if you're using a lifting belt, which is what I use during overhead press, I use a lifting belt in 4 exercises. Actually, 3 exercises: overhead press, squat, and deadlift, and that's it. I don't use it for anything else. I don't use it for bench, but overhead press is one that I think that you could use it on, and it could definitely benefit you. So for those of you who are using a lifting belt, you're not going to compress in, you're going to take a deep belly breath of air and push against the belt. For those of you who aren't using a lifting belt, you just want to keep your core tight in general, and you want to cinch down. So it would be almost the opposite if you're wearing a belt or not wearing a belt. So again, you want to get as tight as possible. Now, one note on getting tight is that a lot of people have real tight hip flexors just from sitting down, from doing everyday activities. Weak glutes is a factor too, but what happens is you'll have people have tight hip flexors, the crease in their hips, but you'll also have, they'll have weak glutes. So it's almost like their butt sticking out. You don't want your butt sticking out during this movement. You want your butt locked down, and then you want that crease in your hips to go away. So you want the crease in your hips to be straight, and you want your glutes fully contracted and locked down. Again, it's a combination of weak glutes and tight hip flexors that kind of makes you have this your butt sticking out position, which you don't want. So you want your glutes contracted and that crease in your hips to kind of be gone when you do that. And you want to keep, again, your core locked down. So once you have all that, we're essentially ready to press from there. So again, we have everything in place. You're here. Keep everything locked down tight. Now from here, where the bar is in relation to your elbows and shoulders is, there's a slight preference to it, but the one thing, and I did a video on this as well, is that with the bar, you don't want the bar internally rotated, or you don't want it to cause you to have some shoulder internal rotation. What I'll see is, in people just starting out, is they'll unrack the bar, and then from here, they'll have a little bit of shoulder internal rotation going on. So they'll have the bar sitting like this, and if you can see, the bar is not over my elbow. You want it over your elbow, or actually slightly behind your elbow. When it's slightly behind your elbow, what that's going to do is it's going to increase the moment in regards to elbow extension, which is going to cause, it's going to basically incorporate your triceps a little bit more into this movement, and a little less delt in chest, just a little bit. Because again, the further the bar is from that joint, the harder it's going to have to work. So for example, when I unrack the bar, if I keep the bar in my hands and straight over my elbows from here, it's going to be, I mean, synergistically, the triceps are going to have to work to extend the arm, but it's not going to have as much tricep recruitment as if I externally rotate it a little bit for here, which is what I recommend you guys do. I want you to externally rotate it a little bit. So straight up and down, externally rotate it just a little bit. I recommend you guys start from this position just to get a little bit of the triceps in. Now, if you don't want to, that's fine, but it's a little bit, it's kind of like a personal preference. It's just going to get triceps a little bit more. I recommend you externally rotate just a little bit, so it does recruit the triceps a little bit more. But one thing that it does is when you have this bar here and you externally rotate, you're keeping that bar closer to you. When you keep that bar closer to you, it's not going to be as hard. For example, if we take this bar and I have you unrack it and slowly move the bar further and further away from you, further away from you, there's going to be a point where it's going to be too hard. If I just kept having you push the bar further and further away from you, it's going to get harder and harder and harder because that moment arm is increasing. It's just, essentially you're going to be doing an isometric front raise, which is not the goal here. So we want to keep that bar close to us. So again, we have straight down, we have slightly externally rotated and slightly internally rotated. We don't want internal rotation at all, an active internal rotation. Now, when we go into this externally rotated position, we're gonna have to internally rotate a little bit to get us back to neutral, but we don't wanna actually go into some form of internal rotation. So that's what we don't want. So to simplify this step, again, I want you to be slightly externally rotated or neutral with your forearms and your shoulder, but not internally rotated at the start. So from here, everything tight. So no, we don't want this. We want here, or slightly externally rotated from here. In regards to the position of your upper back and leaning back, I recommend you lean back a little bit in regards to your upper back. So you just want to lean back just a little bit. So from here, just a little bit. I know some people take it to extremes and lean way back here. You don't want to do that. You want to lean back a little bit. The reason being is, again, one, you want to keep that bar close to you. So again, when you keep the bar closer to you, it's going to decrease the moment arm in regards to the shoulder. So it's going to make it easier. When the bar is further away from us, it's going to make it biomechanically, it's going to put us at a disadvantageous position. So we want to make this, we don't want to make this a harder movement, and on purpose, in that sense, we want to make it easier so we can lift more weight. Now the second thing is, when we do a slight lean back, just a very slight lean back, it's going to a very small degree, I don't want to put a lot of emphasis on this, it's going to turn it into kind of like an incline bench press, just a little bit. I'm not saying a lot, I'm not saying lean way back here, which is going to get a little bit more of the chest involved, which is going to, again, in turn, help us lift a little bit more weight. So I'm not talking about some matrix bullshit here. We're not dodging bullets, doing all that crazy stuff. We're just doing a small lean back. So again, from here, unrack, slight external rotation, slight lean back, get everything tight. And then as we press up, we want to drive our head through, and we want to slightly internally rotate the shoulder to put us back to a neutral position. We're not internally rotating, we're going from an externally rotated position, slightly internally rotating and putting us back to straight up and down. So from here, again, drive through, head back, slight lean back, external rotation, internal rotation, drive through. Again, slight external rotation, head drives through, and then you're slightly internally rotating to putting us back to neutral. And like all movements, you want to go fast on the concentric portion, or I don't want to say all movements because there are exceptions, but for main movements where you're not having some sort of exception, you want to move the bar fast on the concentric portion and controlled on the eccentric. Sometimes I say slow, but when I say slow, I mean controlled. So if I've ever said slow, I meant controlled, but I usually say controlled. So you want to go fast on the concentric portion of the lift and controlled on the eccentric portion of the lift. Again, studies have shown that when you go fast on the concentric portion, you get greater strength gains than if you went slow on the concentric portion of the movement. So you want to go fast up in this movement and control it on the way down. And again, simultaneously, we want to be squeezing this bar as hard as we can because we want to have that synergistic effect that it has with all of the surrounding musculature. If you have, I always use this example, but if you try to flex your bicep and you have a kind of keep a limp wrist, it's going to feel weird. It's going to feel like you can't get a full contraction in your bicep. But if I told you to not keep a limp grip then and squeeze your hand and get it real tight grip and then flex your bicep, you're going to have a synergistic effect with the surrounding musculature. So then you're going to be able to, again, get tighter. Our overall goal is to get tight. So to recap everything, it's real quick. You want the bar about upper chest, collarbone height. So again, not too high, not too low. Hand placement right in front of your shoulders and slightly out. So again, right here, slightly out. Just gonna quarter squat from here, as few steps back as needed for you guys to be able to clear it, but we don't wanna waste too much time or energy taking too many steps back. From here, we wanna get everything tight. Brace your core, squeeze your glutes, lock down your abs, squeeze your quads, everything. From here, slight external rotation, very slight or neutral. I prefer slight external rotation. Slight lean back, then press up fast, and then I want you to drive your head through, and then go to a neutral position, which is gonna force you to have to slightly internally rotate. So from here, it's control, just like that. So again, make sure you don't have that crease in your hips. You have your glutes squeezed tight, and make sure you don't have any internal rotation at the bottom of the movement. Now, if you start with an external rotation, you're gonna have to internally rotate to bring you back to neutral when you actually do the press. But other than that, if you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. Hopefully I didn't make this too complicated for you guys. I'm just giving you my own kind of twist or take on this. But if you guys have any questions, comments, leave them down below. I'll see you guys in the next video.